The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Niehaus, and I want to welcome you to the 18th in our continuing podcast series called CTO Tuesdays. I'm here, as always, with Michael Rowley, our Chief Technology Officer from Active Endpoints. How are you doing today, Michael?
Real good.
And I want to welcome you. Those of you who've attended before know our format, and for those of you who are new, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to what we do, and then we'll get right into our content. A topic that I've been looking forward to for a couple of weeks. First, if you have never used GoToWebinar before, I'd like to tell you how we're going to interact with you during the panel Q&A that we'll have at the end. There's a control panel-like interface to GoToWebinar. You can click the double arrows to minimize the control panel, and I recommend that you click the blue button to maximize the screen screen resolution on your display, so you'll clearly be able to see what Michael's talking about. And one of the things that we love so much about doing CTO Tuesdays is interaction with you. And so there are a couple of ways that you can interact with us for the Q&A. One is you can use the questions area of GoToWebinar. Another, which I'll show you, is Twitter. You can interact with us by using the hashtag CTOT, and we will take questions in either format. One of the things about this style meeting that people seem to enjoy is that you can enter your questions as you go, as they occur to you, and we'll get to all of them during the question and answer session. So very quickly, what is CTO Tuesdays? It's a weekly webinar, almost weekly. We took a week off last week because Michael was traveling, and we've yet to be able to get enough bandwidth on an airplane to do this live. But it's almost a weekly webinar podcast, as I call it, presented by Michael and occasional guest CTOs. We have some guest CTOs coming up. It's every Tuesday at noon, which is 9 a.m. Pacific, and currently is 1600 GMT. And we believe that if you're interested, in business process management, you work as an enterprise or application architect, you're a developer, or you're even evaluating BPM technologies, even technologies that aren't ours, that you'll find the concepts that we present here interesting, because this is meant as educational and not as a product overview. Although we do use ActiveVOS when we illustrate a concept, as you would expect us to. You can always register for the next podcast or webinar at activevos.com/CTOT. So moments after this one ends at around 1 o'clock Eastern Time today, we'll update the website, and that link will take you to the next week's registration page. So I will be back at the end to moderate the Q&A and to give you some more information about us and ActiveVOS. But what I'd like to do now is turn it over to our Chief Technology Officer, Michael Rowley, for today's topic, handling approvals in email for business processes.
Thanks, Alex. So this is a topic that I came upon only fairly recently, because I had kind of for a long time assumed that that tasks in a business process really have to be done in a Worklist system, because this is the way it typically is done. And there's as you may know from previous CTO Tuesdays, there's a standard called WS Human Task that describes the best way to create a Worklist-based system, and that ours is based on, and that any Worklist system really should be based on this standard. But it actually is sometimes okay for the process to include simple tasks that can be done by email and yet still be done in the BPMS. This is as opposed to ad hoc, informal processes within your company where you just, everybody understands that you send an email to people and they send it to somebody else, and there's nothing keeping track of it all. This is saying, okay, still use a BPMS, still have something that keeps track of it and get the benefits of a BPMS, but use email as the actual mechanism for doing the simple task. So the things the questions that I'll be addressing in this talk are: when is it appropriate to use email in this way? How do you do it in a business process? And there's some interesting technologies that you use in order to make this possible. And then how can this fairly simple technique be extended in a variety of ways and reused? So first, I'd like to review worklist-based tasks. And some of the benefits. They are secure. You can know that only the designated user or role can perform the actual activity. They're tracked. The BPMS includes out-of-the-box reports that show outstanding tasks and how long it's taking for tasks and where there are groups and unclaimed tasks and a whole infrastructure there. And the task itself can be complex. There can be, the user might have to specify a lot of data through forms, possibly with repeating elements. The task might have to present a lot of information to the user. Maybe that information will come from other services and all be brought together into a rich internet application style of interacting with the task. And with the BPMS, based on people for people, you can easily escalate tasks where escalation is things like notifications when it's taking too long, or reassignment to somebody else when it's taking too long, because they're kind of built-in qualities. But the main downside is that some people don't want to have to log in, I would say, is the key. And let me just remind you about the worklist-based task and what they look like. This is a task that I've shown in previous episodes, and it's got something for reviewing loans for approval. And you can log in to the loan representative can log into ActiveVOS Central and get a list of their loans, can claim things to work on, and then see it in a preview plane, double-click on it. There are actually some characteristics of this that is kind of built to be similar to Outlook Mail Client, such as the ability to open new tabs for things that you care about. And then when you're working on it, you can do things like decline it and fill in fields, and if you have more than one reason, you can have multiple rejection reasons, and you can add attachments, and you can see the history of the task and the details. So all of this are nice capabilities in this full-fledged task management system. Okay? But in order to see what you've got, or to work on what you've got to log in. There is the ability to get an RSS feed that shows you when you've got new tasks, but you don't work on the tasks there. You just get notified that you've got a new one, and you still have to come into this worklist system. So when you don't want that, there we go. So in some cases, you can do things by email instead. The one nice thing about email is people are continually working, or I know I am continually working in my email anyway. It's simple. I already have my own approaches to keeping track of what are outstanding emails, things I have to do through the email system, the task system. If you can do it by email, then you can complete a task by just a single click, not with click to log in, click to go to a claim, click to approve, all the rest of it. You're done just by a single click. And you can forward the task to somebody else. So some of the capabilities in a worklist system where you forward things around can similarly be done by email in a less somewhat less formal way, anybody you've got the email address of, you can send it to and say, what do you think? When doing things by email, the person that ultimately does the task is not authenticated. That's kind of one of the other side of one-click completion is that there are no clicks related to logging in. So anyone who has gotten a copy of an email will be able to perform this task. But there are times when you've got either individual tasks or entire processes where there really isn't a lot of threat. The risk is low. You've got other ways of determining whether or not it really happened or not, that it's acceptable to handle that. Plus, it's especially useful for infrequent tasks because for going to people that aren't regularly working in the Worklist system and that they're just more frequently just working in email. And the last point is that this style of interaction is primarily appropriate for tasks that can be done with a single click, meaning approve or not approve is the most classic example. So the scenario I'm going to show is that is a vacation approval process. Employee wants to go on vacation for a certain date. Boss needs to approve. You would like some record of the request for approval and the denial and maybe some other processes around this. But you really don't need the boss to be sitting on their Worklist system to achieve this. It really can be fairly low-key. So let's go to the business process. I've got this vacation approval process. Vacation approval request will come in from a form, and you'll get a response to the initial request for it. There will be this approval by email sub-process, and this is something that will be reusable. I'll go into the details of this later on what actually happens there. And then you'll send an email to the person saying whether or not it's approved or not. So let me walk through the actual runtime. So I've got this same guy. I'm going to go to the form for requesting vacation approval, and I'm actually going to request one for myself. And I like having a capital R. And I'll go to Active. This is me. I'm going to say that I'm at classic.customer@gmail.com. That's an account we happen to have laying around. I'm going to say that boss's email is ActiveVOSCTO@gmail.com. I want to go on vacation starting the 31st, tomorrow. I'll go for 2 days. Send a request. I'm giving a little request number, so if ever I need to ask about it, I can say, you know, what happened to that request? This has kicked off a request. You can see this new vacation approval request that's going on. We're into the approve by email. It's sent the original email, and it's waiting for an answer. So now I can see this is my Gmail account for this for the boss. I see you got vacation request from Michael Rowley. I'll go in and say, Michael Rowley would like to take vacation starting on 3/31. The boss saying, by the way, you approved this guy. So that is the interaction style that's happening. Now let's go into more of how I got this to work. I'm going to show you some of talk a little bit about the technologies that are involved in getting this to work. Now, I would say there are kind of three key technologies. Email, you need to be able to send the email that includes HTML links from the business process. REST, it's actually the acronym you don't need to know too much about, representational state transfer. But this first sub-bullet is what you really need to know, which is there has to be an ability to send a message into a process that's waiting for a message by merely clicking on a URL. And the URL itself contains parameters, some parameters for identifying what process we're talking about, and some for giving the answer. So in this case, I've got this URL. The key thing is this little question mark in the URL that's for the query parameters section. One says answer is denied if it had been denied, and the other one is the request number. And then the last thing is how do you get the URL? And we're going to make use of this concept of URN mapping. A URN is a uniform resource name as opposed to a locator or identifier. And we're going to make use of the ability of the runtime to map these fairly logical names into a more physical address. So let me show how these capabilities are used in the process. So I'll go to the process itself, and first I want to say that all of this capability for approving by email I've put into this collapsed sub-process. One value in doing this as a collapsed sub-process is I can use it more than once. If I've got a bunch of steps that are all could be handled by using email, I can do something like add this to the palette. So this is something you might not have seen before. You can create custom palette entries, and you can see it just showed up under this little custom section. And I can say, like, email approval. And then everywhere I want, anytime I want to be able to do an email approval, I'll just drag it in and then drill into it and clarify what actually has to happen. So what sorts of things do I have to specify? One important one is, what does the email look like that goes to the user? This is the most important piece of this, is how do you actually construct this, this email? There's going to be aspects of it that is the body of the email, which shows what is being approved. I'm using the XQuery capability. This is a really good way of putting together an entire XML message all in one fairly easy to understand way, because you can see the XML tags, but you also see these little curly brace sections. And everywhere there's a little curly brace section, it means instead of just using this literally, you evaluate the insides of this, the expression that is in it. So going through this, I have a from that is no reply, because that's not how we're dealing with it. I've got a variable that's the boss's email. That was pulled from the original request. I put in the subject that, I want a vacation request for, and then I just pull out the name of the guy. This is, whenever you're doing one of these expressions, it's easy enough to just click through and just click on something that you intend to keep. So, like for this one, if I wanted to redo this, I would just double-click on the name, and that's how I filled in that value. Then the body, so-and-so would like to take a vacation starting on, turn the date into a string, and lasting for so many days. Then the tricky part. I'm going to send, starting with my address, that's the part that I showed you that has the full URL. My address, the first link is going to say the answer is approved, and the request number is my process. The next one is going to say same address, only this one is going to say the answer is denied, and the request number is the same process. Okay. Now, so then the next question is, how did I get these values? How did I get my address? So let me close that up and go to the let me show the process variables view, and I can see there's my address, which has got an initial value that is making use of the URN capability. It's resolving a URN that is this REST URN that I've talked about with my address of the REST EPR. EPR stands for endpoint reference. So if I flip to my console, I'm flipping to my console, I can see there's these mappings that say every time you get this in a URN, map it to something real. And what to map it to. This is where I can provide my machine name. Now, a lot of this capability of how do I construct the right URL in order to send the right email, you really don't. You have to figure it out once, and then you can, from then on, ignore it. Or, in fact, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting this project in the coming weeks and days or weeks up on the website so that people can play with this if they're interested in it. So you can see the way I've done this. Then you can just drag your email request on into a process using this custom thing, and then just deal with the easy parts, which is where do you get the email from, and what should the email contain, and then let this URN mapping and the construction of my address just follow the pattern that's already been constructed. The receiving of the answer, then, this is where we are taking advantage of the fact that the business process can wait for a message, and the message itself is being sent by somebody clicking on a URL. I've got this participant, which is called the approver by REST, which is using the REST interface to the business process. And when you actually receive the request, when you get the answer, you can pull the data out of it. You can get the answer out of some parameter whose name is value, whose name is answer and that has a value, and that will be put into the answer variable. You acknowledge the answer by sending another, HTML message. In fact, this is a thing that says you just approved or denied the vacation request, and then you're done. So you make use of this pattern as many times as you want. You can vary the pattern in different ways if you want to add timeouts and have escalation paths and various other ways. And then you've got the whole rest of the process to deal with, okay, if it was approved, just send the approval, or you could get more complicated, that if it's approved, you do other things.
Like update the company time off database.
Exactly, exactly. And in fact, let me just show you a variety of other things you might do to extend the example. In the place where you're waiting for the request to come in, what if it doesn't? What if it's taking too long? The BPMS has event handlers and timeout capabilities, so you can either send a reminder or maybe send it the similar email but to somebody else. Or you could, if the email isn't working out for you, create a worklist task that you start up if it's taking too long. Now what about this email? In this really simple example, I typed in the email of my boss. In some cases where you'd want to use email, you might want to go to the catalog and get the email of the approver for whatever it is you're doing. Or you could go to the identity service and find the email, or some other service. Or maybe you can make use of email aliases, and you can say, you can have an HR mailing list or approvers mailing list or whatever. There's various techniques for dealing with the who of who's going to read and answer this email. And then after it's been approved, you can really get this more complex. You can maybe have a service that records an out-of-office calendar, or you can send an automatic notification to HR that's going to withdraw it from your vacation balance. Just a variety of things that you couldn't do if you're using a completely informal process that's only email and people just knowing where to send email to. By having it in the BPMS, you can do this. And you can also create reports around what things are outstanding and where there's what approvals have happened. So that's the basic approach, and I'll be interested in hearing questions.
Thanks so much, Michael. As always, really a fascinating overview of the kind of things that you can do with the BPMS. So what I'd like to do before we get to our Q&A is first remind you how you can interact with us. One way is through Twitter using the hashtag CTOT. Another is through the question and answer portion of GoToWebinar. Before we get to the Q&A, I'd like to ask you all, our attendees, for your opinions. We have thought about, and I had a suggestion, I think a couple of weeks ago from a regular attendee to CTO Tuesdays, that we should provide transcripts of CTO Tuesdays in PDF form on the replays. And so what I'd like to do is, before we go off and do that, is to get you guys, our attendees, input on that. You can send us a comment at CTOT@ActiveVOS.com. Let us know whether you think we'd find the transcripts valuable. I want to tell you that if we did start transcribing them, it would mean that replays posted to CTOTuesdays.com and CTOTuesdays.com/feed would be delayed by probably 3 or 4 business days. What we've been able to achieve so far without the transcripts is having the replays up typically by Wednesday afternoon Eastern Time. And we noticed quite a large number of attendees, and also people who didn't attend but are regular attendees, download the replays right away. So we'd really like your guidance and input. If you don't mind dropping us an email or putting it in the Q&A. What do you think? Should we take the delay and post a written transcript of these podcasts, or should we continue on as we have and favor instead making the replays available right away? The other thing I'd like to say is that we've been thinking a bit about how to reward those of you who have been attending every week. And so I hope to have in a few weeks a little beanie propeller head logoed item for you that we can possibly send out to people who've achieved some level of addiction to this podcast by attending. We don't know yet what the qualifications will be, but they will be stringent because the propeller heads are battery operated. We don't want to send a battery operated device to anyone who is not capable of reading the instructions. I'm trying to be funny, and it's probably not coming across well. Anyway, let me run through the things on the slide, then we'll get right to the Q&A. Please send us a comment about whether or not we should use transcripts or any other feedback you have to us at ctot@activos.com. As I mentioned before, you can always register for upcoming webinars at activos.com/ctot. I mentioned as we were talking about transcripts where you can download replays. We also have an RSS feed. We're also in the iTunes store. The ActiveVOS website, we've been doing quite a lot of work on it lately, and Michael mentioned in passing that he's going to post this sample to the ActiveVOS website. I thought what I might do is show you a little bit of what the sample apps page that was just changed yesterday looks like and what you might be able to take advantage of there. So at the moment we have 4 applications up. By the way, from our home page, you access the sample applications section in our Start Here sample apps links. So there are 4 apps, and each app has a short description along with some very clever documentation. So for the quote processing sample application, there's a user's guide, and portions of this demonstration are in fact hosted online. So you have to do nothing other than print out this user's guide and begin to get experience of using the application yourself online. We host that. The other document that's available in some sample applications is a design guide, which will help you understand how to use the application at a detailed level. For all of the applications, we have the processing artifacts, the application's artifacts, which are downloadable as a zip file. So this includes the people that would be necessary to run the application. And then what we've just done is we've created a combined trial pre-configured with all 4 of these sample applications, and I presume will work the one that you've just demoed here for the first time, Michael, I hope, into this combined demonstration. So you can download a trial of ActiveVOS that has all of the integrated demonstrations that has the demonstrations integrated into it, and then come back to the section of the website for all of the documentation that goes along with it as a way of learning how a BPMS can be used for a wide variety of application types. So with that, I would like to get to the Q&A, and I want to ask a question, Michael, about the authentication idea that you brought up, because it's not just, I think maybe we should discuss a little more of the design guide, the design guidance for people, because email, as most everyone knows, is typically very insecure, extraordinarily insecure, especially if you are going cross-organization. So for example, if you needed I don't know why in this example, but if you needed someone outside the company to approve this request, it's likely that the message would go over an unencrypted network, very likely. So as you were talking about the advantages of email, I was thinking, this is kind of a significant disadvantage. I just want to get your thoughts on whether or not using an ancillary technology like email is worth it in these low impact processes given the security risks.
Yeah, it's certainly something that you need to be aware of, the fact that anybody who's got their hands on the email can construct the URL, can click on this URL, and merely clicking on the URL will make something happen, approval or denial. And it's kind of the combination of the use of email and the URL that makes it so that it's open to issues, because yes, you log into your email account with a password, but because the email contains a URL that can be clicked on, and that is not doing any authentication, there is no mechanism for that. There is a possibility that somebody else could get their hands on it, or even construct the URL.
Yeah, one of the things I'm sure you told your grandmother, I tell mine, is never click on a link in email as a sort of basic security,
yeah, sure.
as sort of a basic security thing. So I just think people need to understand that the Worklist system has some costs, but it's got, but using email, sort of a loosely coupled kind of approval process, has some significant issues with it too, at least in terms of security and authentication. Sure. Could I just get a clarification on URN to URL mapping? You went by fairly quickly. I just want to confirm that URLs, that the mapping is stored in the catalog, yeah, and that means that it's a logical, the application uses URNs, which is logical, and through a catalog of some kind, they're mapped to the physical world of URLs.
Right, yes. I went by that a bit fast. And the key thing is to not have, as part of the process, anything that depends on where it's deployed. And so you would like to put in the process, and even in the deployment information, or for the process, something that is independent of where it's deployed. And then the runtime can take this logical concept of the name and turn it into the physical address that includes things like the machine name and port and other such things you wouldn't want to hard code.
Good. Good. Thanks for clarifying that for me. So once again, enter your questions in the question section of GoToWebinar or on Twitter using the hashtag CTOT. Here's a question. An attendee asks, does clicking the link in email require that the recipient has access to the ActiveVOS engine via HTTP? And this attendee went on to comment, he means that the emails are very attractive in that they easily cross organization and geographical boundaries, one of the concerns we were just discussing though, firewalls, and more. They may get where internal HTTP resources like the ActiveVOS URL are unavailable.
Right, right. So I think the question kind of implies the answer. Yes, you need to be able to get to the host and port of the engine that is running the BPMS, ActiveVOS, from the guy who's clicking the link. So if it's outside of the firewall and ActiveVOS is inside of the firewall and it's not available, then you're going to have to use some other mechanism.
But that's an incoming request, because it's REST, right? That's an incoming request on port 80, is it not?
It's on whatever port you've been deployed to.
Oh, so you could, so that
the URL includes the port.
I missed that. I missed that. That's right. No, I saw it. Yes, it's 8081. But yeah, you could use a common port.
Yeah.
That you open for other purposes.
Right. Exactly.
Okay. All right. Good. Another question we've had is, would it be possible to let the recipient just reply or hit the voting button in Outlook and have the server identify the original process and task outcome from a response subject and body?
Yeah. So handling it where the engine is receiving SMTP messages, mail messages, and parsing those messages and trying to figure out what the response is. I think there's a couple issues with it. Most VPMSs, including ours, doesn't actually provide an incoming SMTP port for receiving mail. But even if it did, being able to parse an email message and get an appropriate answer, I think it'd be easy to mess that up, put it that way. And it would be also fairly potentially complex. within the process that it's taking an email message, and you never know exactly what a person's going to do with their email message. So they have to make sure that they don't toy with anything that is going to be automatically processed. And then you have to write the processing of whatever headers you're dealing with. It's possible, but it's certainly more complex than the approach that I've put forward.
Yeah, I mean, one idea that occurs to me, but it would be client-specific, is to use a custom Outlook form so that you would be able, assuming you had the incoming ability to parse messages, which doesn't sound that hard to me, right? That you could receive SMTP messages instead of clicking on a link. You could use an Outlook form, which are pretty easily designed, and a little VB script behind it to always produce the right. Then the user could click a button and it would always produce the right email, which you would not have to parse in any specific way. You would just know it.
Right. It's
an odd form of message passing, though.
Yeah, it's not clear to me that there's a huge value in having the response go back by SMTP versus HTTP. It's got to go by email versus by web mechanism.
Okay, well, Michael, another really fascinating CTO Tuesdays. I can't thank you enough. We would welcome, we had a couple comments via the Q&A on whether or not we should use transcripts. It looks like people are not wild about the transcripts, but if you would just let us know via email if you have a strong preference for getting transcripts of these podcasts, we'd appreciate it. And we will be back next week, right, Michael?
Yes.
No more breaks for us. We'll be back next Tuesday at noon with another edition of CTO Tuesday.